All right, so I'm just gonna check and make sure this is live, and it looks like it is. So we're just gonna do a quick run through of specifically, I'm gonna show my workflow when I'm using Git and GitHub, and I'll try to find a few of the things that people tend to get hung up on, or some of the things that are maybe a little bit more confusing. So can anyone here just confirm for me real quick that you have access to the video and that you can see my screen, just so I make sure this isn't all for nothing? Got it, thank you. All right, I appreciate that. Okay, so let's get the ball rolling. And I'll leave the VOD up on the YouTube channel. So if anyone doesn't catch it right now, if you're busy and this isn't a good time for you, hopefully you can just take a look at it later. Okay, so the first thing that I'd like to go over here is that when I start a new project, I follow the exact same steps every time. So I'm going to go through that. What I'm going to do might seem like a little bit of overkill for how small the application I'm going to be building for this particular example is, but the purpose is not necessarily to build an application. It's just to show how I use Git and GitHub to avoid conflicts and merge issues and all those other problems that you have with rebasing. And this is going to be very basic. I'm going to go through like 6 different Git commands that I use regularly and a brief overview of when and how I use them. So the first thing I'm going to do just to get the ball rolling here is I'm going to create a new project. And let's just make an Express app. So we'll do npm init y, and then npm install express. This will just be so we have something to base it off of. So we'll create a source folder, and then we will make an index.html, or I'm sorry, an index.js file inside of the source folder. So let's just import express. And we'll create our express app. All right, we're going to set it up to listen at port 3000. And then let's create an endpoint. And what do we want this to do? Let's just have it do res.json, and then we'll do hello world, like this. And we're going to prefix the request with an underscore, just to make it a little bit more semantically correct. Let's take a look at our package.json, and let's add a serve script. And we'll use nodemon, so it'll automatically restart. And that means we need to install nodemon. All right, I think that's everything we need. Okay, what did I miss here? I missed something, clearly. Oh, I didn't save the script. Let's try this again. npm run serve. All right. Beautiful. So let's take a look at localhost 3000 and we have hello world. All right, so now we have a good starting point for our application. So this is what I do when I'm starting a new application. What I'm going to do usually is go to GitHub, and then I'm going to create a new repository by clicking on this button right here. And in case anyone's here right now, if you have any questions, if anything I say is unclear, just jump into the voice chat, unmute yourself, and let me know, and I'll try to clear anything up. So what I want to do is create a repository name. What I'm going to do for this particular instance is I'm going to name it Discord Git. We don't need a description. And then public versus private. It depends what kind of app you're working on, of course. So if you're building out some sort of startup and you're in stealth mode, for example, maybe you want to build it private. If you're doing something open source, you're going to want it to be public. And we definitely don't want to update Java right now. I'm not going to choose to add a README here. And for the git ignore template, I'm going to type node and just select the node git ignore template. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to do that because I have an extension that I'm going to use instead. So I'll show you that. And for a license, we don't need a license. This is incredibly unimportant for what we're doing right now. So now the cool thing about GitHub is that it gives you some scripts that you can copy and paste. So this top one right here, what it's going to do is it's going to initialize a Git project locally. Well, first it's going to create a README with the repo name. Then it's going to initialize the project, the Git folder. Then it's going to add that README that it just created to the tracking. Then it's going to create a commit that says first commit. It's going to set the branch to the main branch, and then it's going to add the remote origin branch. So we'll go a little bit more into detail about what this means, but for the time being, just to get the ball rolling, we're going to copy all of this and we're going to paste it right into our terminal here. Okay, so if we take a look at our source control here, we're going to see any files that change. So if we add an exclamation point here, for example, we'll notice in VS Code, what we should notice, oh, we're not tracking it yet. So what I generally do is I'll do git add period, and that will add everything. But before we do that, we're going to want to add a git ignore file. So I have this extension. I think I have two git ignore extensions. So I have one to add a file to the git ignore, and then I have one to pull a git ignore template from GitHub. So I'm going to use this one. We'll do add git ignore, and then it's going to give us a list of all of the different templates that we have. So we'll type node. And now if we go over to our sidebar here, we see that we have a git ignore, and it has all of the standard files that we want added to that git ignore. So that's going to save us some time. We have our environment variables right here. We have our node modules in here somewhere. So now we can do git add period to add everything, and we don't have to worry about adding files that we don't want. Okay. What I'll do here is I'll also put the commands in this README, and then I'll share the repo afterwards in case you want to copy the commands or reference them. I'll copy all of this right here. And I might edit it a little bit later and make it look a little bit nicer. All right, so now if we take a look at our source control here, let's actually add a commit. We'll say git commit and then -m for message, and then we're gonna put a message here. Now, I was just made aware recently that my Git messages aren't like semantically proper, or however you would say it. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. At some point, if I'm working with a larger team, it might be a little bit more important. I work with a pretty small team, or I work on like individual projects, so I've really never had to concern myself with this too much. I like to make the messages descriptive and sort of state what I did in this previous session. So here I'm going to say added files to Git tracking. And so I'm a little bit confused about why it's not showing up here. I never really use this source control inside of VS Code, so if anyone knows, I'd be interested to know why the files aren't showing up here. I don't know if it's that it just needs to be restarted or something, but we're doing everything from the terminal today. So since we pushed it to GitHub, when we created this remote origin, that's what's going to allow us to push it and to have everything actually appear on GitHub. So the workflow that I'm always doing all day long is going to be git add period, git commit, message, some message, and then git push. This is the bulk of what I'm doing when I'm working with Git at work. And then obviously you're going to be changing branches. You're going to be doing, I'm sorry, burned out from a long day. So you're going to be dealing with merge conflicts sometime, especially when you're working with a group of people, but I'll show you how to deal with that in just a minute here. But these three commands right here, I feel like I type this 1,000 times a day. All right, so if we take a look at the repo right now, if I refresh the page, we're going to see that README file here, and just the README file, because if we reference this, you could see that all we did originally was we added the README file. Where is it? Git add readme.md. So now if we push this, since we added everything in that last step, then when we refresh GitHub again, we'll see all of our files. So I think that most of you understand this much so far. This isn't the confusing part, but I've had a few people reach out to me over the last 2 days, all working with Git issues. So I'm going to try to recreate some of those issues right now. And in case you're interested, this this branch right here, it's showing up because I'm using I don't know how to say it, ZSH. It's Z shell because I'm on Mac OS, and Z shell is just the default now instead of Bash on modern Macs. But if you're on Windows, you can install, I believe it's called Git Bash or Git SCM or something like that, and it lets you use Bash on your Windows computer. Although I would recommend using WSL or the Windows subsystem for Linux, because it'll have all of this stuff baked into it. So now if I do git status, it's going to show me what isn't committed. So we see that changes have been made to the README that haven't been committed. And since we're just starting the project off here, I'm going to push to the main branch one more time. Generally speaking, you never want to push to the main branch. You only want to merge into the main branch. But just for the sake of getting everything caught up, I'm going to push one more commit here. All right, so everything's caught up now. So this is where a new project starts. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do here is we need to create some new branches. What I generally like to do is I like to have a branch named dev, and that's going to be my staging branch. So when I'm working with a production project, the main branch is what's going to be built, for production. The dev branch is going to be built on a different server, and that's what the client is going to look at to say whether or not they like the changes that we've made, or to request that additional changes be made. And then I'm going to have a feature branch that I'm working on. So anytime that I make changes to this feature branch, I'm going to be merging those changes up into that dev branch, and then from the dev branch into the main branch. So let's get the ball rolling here. We're going to want to create a new branch, and I'll actually update the README afterwards because I don't want to have to push any more commits before we do this. So we're going to do git checkout -b for branch, and then we're going to give the branch a name. So in this case, we're going to do dev. Again, this is the staging branch. And now we do git push, and then it's going to give us this command right here. We could have typed this in, but I always just do it this way and then copy and paste it. And that will create a new branch in our GitHub repo. So if I refresh this, we see we have 2 branches now. I take a look at the dropdown, we have main and we have dev. What I like to do at this point is I go into the settings, and then I go into branches, and I like to add a branch protection rule. And then I'll type in the name of the branch, and then if we just save it, it will make sure that this branch can't be deleted. So now our dev branch is protected just like the main branch is. So the most important thing is just make sure you're always pushing upstream. You never want to skip over the dev branch and push right from the feature branch to main. You never want to push from main to dev or main to feature. You always want to push upstream every single time, no matter what. All right, so now the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to create a third branch, and the third branch is actually going to be a feature branch. So let's say that we want to add a second endpoint. What we're going to do here is, let's add another endpoint, and let's say person. And then what we're going to return from person is just going to be name, Bob, age, 31, employed, true. All right, so some basic information there. And I just broke one of my rules because I didn't create the feature branch, but this is actually a really good opportunity to show you something else. If you start working on something and then you realize that you're on the wrong branch, you can use this command called git switch. Okay, so it's going to be git switch -c for change, and then we need to give it the name of the new branch. So in this case, I want to call this branch, we'll call it feature. And then if we do git push, again, we'll be prompted to copy and paste this and create that feature branch. All right, so now if we save this, we can actually do git add everything, git commit, we'll say created feature branch with person endpoint. And then git push. So let's take a look at GitHub one more time. We have our main branch, we have our dev branch, and then we have our feature branch. So bear with me for one moment while I just update this README. And I promise you we'll get to these problems in just a second here. Okay. So, all right, this is where things are going to start getting interesting. Let's just update this one more time so that our README is updated. Git add everything, git commit, updated README, and git push. Okay. So now if we want to switch branches without creating a new branch, because this -b right here, this creates a new branch. So if we want to switch branches without creating a new branch, we just do git checkout. So we could do git checkout dev. And now it's saying that my local changes are going to be overwritten. And that's because we updated the README. So there's two things that you can do here. You can either push your commit and then switch branches, or you can do Git Stash. I'm just going to copy this for a second. Now, if we do Git Stash, now what it does is it takes all of the changes and it sort of puts them off to the side. Think about it like an array. I'm sure most of you are familiar with JavaScript. Or if you're familiar with Python, think of it like a list. So what it's doing is it creates a list or an array, and every time you stash your changes, it adds it like an object to that array or that list. So we can stash several different changes on each branch, and then we can pop them off of that array when we want them back. So now that we've stashed it, we can do git checkout dev, and it'll work without a problem. It'll bring us right back to exactly how the project was the last time we commit to the dev branch. So I'll get to in just a few minutes what happens if someone else pushes to that dev branch and now suddenly you don't sync up anymore. We'll get there in just a minute, but I just wanted to show you how to switch branches. So let's go back to our feature branch and then git stash. I want to say pop to get our changes back. And then let me just add another notation here for change branches. And let's push our commit one more time. Just say updated README again. This is lazy. Don't do this. Don't use these stupid little commits, and don't use the same commit over and over again. But I want to actually get to the stuff that you guys are getting hung up on and try to work through it. Okay, so what I would like to do now is I want to show you how you merge branches. So if we go back to GitHub, we see we have this notification saying that feature had recent pushes less than a minute ago. So we can click on compare and pull request, but you're not always going to have this banner up here. So if this happened, if this push happened, let's say yesterday, we might not have a notification. So the way that you would create this is you go to pull requests. So let's do compare and pull request, or I'm sorry, new pull request. And we're going to select on the right side the most recent branch. So the feature branch that we're working on, the one that we want to merge into a higher up branch. So we're going to say that we want to take this feature branch that we've been working on, and we want to merge our changes into dev. You see that it says that we can merge our changes into main, and technically we can. But in order to sort of use best practices and avoid a lot of the common hangups, we want to always make sure that we're going through the proper chain. So if we are in fact using this dev branch as a staging branch, then we're going to want to make sure we merge into that and then from dev into main. So let's create the pull request. Now here you could leave a comment, you could write down some information about this commit or about the merge, or if you have someone that's going to review it, you can assign them to it here. There's a lot of settings to play with, but again, we're working mostly on like the merge and the merge errors right now. So let's go ahead and create the pull request. And it's checking to make sure that it can in fact merge. So now it says that it passed, we're good to go. We're going to merge the pull request. So now it's going to tell us that we can delete this branch. I'll leave it here because we're going to do some more stuff with it. But you could delete it if you're done working on this particular feature. Let's go back to our editor. And so this is an issue that earlier today someone reached out to me about. This is actually pretty common. So if we switch over to dev, let's do git checkout dev. And now if we start making changes on this dev branch, let's cause an error right now. So keep in mind, we just updated the dev branch. What we should be doing right now is we should pull the branch. That would give us the most recent updates. But instead, let's say that we make some changes. Let's go to our index.js and let's add this person. We're going to add the person endpoint again. We're just trying to create, some errors here. Say Bob 32 employed false. So now we have a conflict. If we try pushing now, so let's do git add period, git commit, and we will say updated or created new endpoint. And now git push. And now we're getting an error. So the reason it's telling us that we have this error is because keep in mind, we just pushed from the feature branch into the dev branch. So the dev branch has already been updated. Now we've made different changes on the dev branch and we're trying to push that, but the dev branch knows that what we're pushing up right now doesn't match the dev branch. So I hope that makes sense. I know I'm not articulating it very well, but hopefully the demonstration is clear-ish, So you might see this type of thing if you're working with someone else and after you're done working on a particular feature branch, someone else keeps making commits and pushing them to that feature branch and they're not communicating with you well about it. But realistically, as the developer, it's your responsibility to make sure you pull from that branch every time you're going to start working on it. And I personally believe, other people might have different opinions, but I personally believe that you should always discard feature branches when you're moving on to a new feature. So you shouldn't keep jumping into the same branch and working on it over and over again. Just make sure you're always pushing upstream, make sure you're always creating new branches for new features, and you won't run into this issue very often. But it tells you exactly what to do right here. It gives you some ideas at least. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do git pull because I want to sync my local computer with the changes that were on this dev branch before I tried pushing to it. So we do git pull. And now we have a merge error because it's saying, well, I'm trying to pull this onto your machine, but your machine has these different changes that don't really match. So now you need to pick which ones you like or which ones you want. There's a few different ways to go about it. If you have some tools installed on your text editor, you can see that it's prompting me to click and I can choose if I want to accept the current changes, if I want to accept the incoming changes, if I want to keep both of them, or if I want to compare them. But what I think is a better process is to just do it manually. If you decide that you want to accept the current changes or you want to accept the incoming changes, it's very possible that there's going to be some consequences that you're not mindful of at the time. So especially when you're working with a larger code base, let's say that there are changes in, 15 different files. It's very possible that you're going to merge some breaking changes or cause yourself a debugging nightmare. So I like to go through it manually. Now you can see that Git has added some lines in here. This is actually text right there. So what we need to do in order to fix this is we need to get rid of one of these two things. So I'm going to say, you know what, I liked the original one. I'll get rid of the new stuff that I just created. And now we're going to have to get rid of this line right here also. And then we save it. Now if we do git add period, git commit, fixed merge error. And we'll do git push. And now it worked. So I'm so sorry because I forget names sometimes, but whoever I was talking to earlier today about this, this is the exact issue that you had, Kenny, Knny. And if that's not your real name, I apologize. I don't think we had like a proper introduction. But this is exactly what happened with you earlier today. After you started working in the other branch, your partner made changes to the branch and you didn't pull those changes before you tried committing to it again. So that's exactly how you fix it. And that's a very, very common issue when you're just getting started. Okay, so now that we have that, let's take a look at GitHub again. Let's take a look. Let's do compare and pull request. And now we can see that we can merge from dev into main and there aren't any issues there. Let's merge it. All right. So now our main branch in production is up to date. All of our branches should be correct at this point, except the feature branch, because keep in mind, we don't need this feature branch anymore. We're done with this feature. We can delete this branch. So I'll just go into, I always forget how to do this and have to click around for 10 minutes. All right, we're going to delete that feature branch because we don't need it anymore. But anytime you switch branches, so if we do git checkout main, now we can see that we're behind. The first thing that you want to do anytime you switch branches is git pull. Worst case scenario, it'll tell you that there's nothing to pull. But this is how you're always going to make sure that you don't run into those merge errors. So does anyone have any questions so far? Anything you want me to try to be a little bit more clear about or go through slower? Oh, bear with me for 1 second. It looks like I've had a ton of messages on Discord. I don't know if someone's trying to ask me something. I swear to God, nothing makes me feel older than Discord. Okay, all right, I think we're good. So this is very important. Keep in mind the story we're telling ourselves here, that we are using our main branch, as the main branch for production. We're using the dev branch for staging, which means that we shouldn't be pushing directly to dev, but I did just for the sake of this demonstration. But now we're going to work on a new feature. Let's create a new branch and let's call it third endpoint. We don't want to do that from main, so be mindful of where you're doing this from. We always want to push upstream, so make sure that if you're working with this type of format where you have a production branch and then you have a staging branch, you want to make sure that you switch to the staging branch and then you you create a new branch off of that. So make sure you're always going upstream when you're pushing and then downstream when you're creating new branches. So what we're going to do is git checkout dev, and then again, to be safe, we're going to do git pull. It says it's already up to date. And now we're going to do git checkout, and we're going to create this third branch, call it third endpoint. Git checkout -b. And now we'll do git push. We'll copy and paste this. And if we take a look at GitHub again, now we have our third endpoint branch here, and it's going to be identical to the dev branch that we just created the branch off of. Okay, so I'm trying to think of any other types of problems that we could cause. Let's do this. Let's also create a branch called fourth endpoint. So I'm going to do git checkout, and we're going to do dev. Because think about this. We're going to think of these as two different people. The third endpoint is going to be person A, and fourth endpoint will be person B. And you're both forking off of that dev branch at the same time. Okay, so let's see if we can cause some issues here. Let's create two more endpoints here. I'm sorry, we only want to do one because person B is going to do the other one. We'll call this one third. So let's say we want to say Sam, he's 22, and false for employed. Now, let's jump over to person B, or person A rather, because I was on fourth endpoint. I'm going to jump to third endpoint. So now person A is creating a new endpoint. We'll call this person A. I'm losing track of things here in my head, so I'm sure that I'm probably confusing the hell out of all of you as well. But now he's going to create one called Terrence, age 50, employed, true. But while he's working on it, he notices that, okay, Bob actually isn't employed, and he changes this to false. So now we have some conflicting changes. So now person A and person B are both going to push their commits. We're going to push that. Now let's check out the fourth endpoint and do the same thing. Oh, it looks like we already did this. Let's just, let's make another minor change here. Okay, so now person A and person B both created a new branch off of the dev branch. These branches were called third endpoint and fourth endpoint. Person A and person B both made changes to the code base, and now person A and person B are both going to be pushing those changes into the dev branch. They're pushing it upstream. We know that we're going to have an issue with this because either person A or person B, I don't remember, one of them made some changes to some existing code. So let's see if we run into some issues here. So right now we are going to be person A. Person A was working on third endpoint, so we're going to create a new pull request. And think about what pull request is actually saying. A pull request is saying, I've made changes to this code. I want you to pull it into the main code base. So you create the pull request, and then whoever is maintaining the repo, or the project manager or the lead developer, they're the ones who are supposed to review the changes and determine whether or not it should be merged. But we're not going to go that in depth today. And maybe I'll actually put together a more, like a more scripted video about this. And, because I've been sitting in the seat for the last 8 hours. I'm beyond exhausted, and I have a feeling that no one's probably learning anything right now. So maybe I'll put some actual time and energy into something a little bit more proper at some point. But we've had so many Git issues these last 2 days that I'm just trying to shed a little bit of light on how this process should work. Okay, so person A just built out the third endpoint. They want to merge it into the dev branch. There's no issues here. So we're going to create the pull request. And here we go, merging it. And just as we expected, no issues. Now, person B signs into GitHub, and they create a pull request for their fourth endpoint they just created. And they want to also merge that into the dev branch. But now we get this error saying that we can't automatically merge. But that doesn't mean that you can't still create a pull request. Different people are going to have different ideas about how they want to fix this type of thing. I'm going to show you what I would do if I ran into this problem at work. I'm still going to create the pull request. And maybe I'll put a comment in here, merge error. We'll create the pull request. And now this is where GitHub is a really awesome tool. Keep in mind, this is really important because I didn't understand this for the longest time, and someone just recently explained it to me, like way later than I would like to admit. But pull requests aren't a Git feature. Pull requests are a GitHub feature. So what we're doing right now, this is specific to GitHub or GitLabs or whatever version control system you're using. Pull requests are not part of Git in and of itself. So Git has a really awesome built-in UI for managing these types of conflicts. Now, let's take a look at how this works. We click on Resolve Conflicts, and just like we saw before, where it adds a little bit of text in there, we can see that the commit from the branch fourth endpoint has something that's conflicting with the other branch. So we have age 29 on one of them, and we have age 31 on the other. So there's two ways. Let me zoom out again. There's two ways that we can go about fixing this. Keep in mind where these, well, we'll just call them brackets. Keep in mind where the brackets are. So we can either delete this right here, or we're going to have to delete everything else in between. It's basically saying that everything between these brackets is valid or everything between these brackets is valid, but we need to pick one of them. But you can use some common sense here and sort of decide what you want to do. You could say, okay, it looks like he updated the age. So let's just delete the age right here. And now all we have to do is delete the stuff that GitHub added in. And that would, don't forget to delete the end part right here. Otherwise, the app's going to have more problems. But you can look at this and say, okay, this all makes sense. It looks like it's all good now. So the other thing that's cool is if you have more than one merge error, you can do this previous and next, and it will sort of scroll around. It'll jump around the page for you and show you where the errors are. So as far as I'm concerned, this is resolved. We're going to click Mark as Resolved. And now we can commit the merge. It's going to see if it can merge it, and now we're not getting that error anymore. We merge the pull request. And let's go ahead and delete that fourth endpoint. Let's also delete the third endpoint. It's always a good idea to delete feature branches when you're done with them, just to make things less complicated. Now keep in mind though, that even though this is deleted, look what happens if I go back to, I'm still in fourth endpoint locally. So if I make a change here, maybe I add something to the README. I do git add period, git commit, README, git push. If we take a look at GitHub again, that branch that we just deleted is back. So just deleting a branch out of GitHub doesn't mean that that branch is gone, because it's still locally on your machine. It's gone from the version control, it's gone from the cloud, but locally on your machine it still exists. So don't be shy about deleting feature branches that you're done with, as long as you're not also deleting them off of your machine. So let's go to this fourth endpoint, and as a matter of fact, I think I'm just going to delete this again, because there's really nothing to demonstrate here at this point. I just wanted to show you that that's how it works. Okay, so now we've already merged these. So now what are we going to do? We're going to pull the dev branch again, git checkout dev, and then git pull. It's going to update everything for us. And let's just go through one more pull request here. We'll create a pull request, and we're going to merge from dev into main. This is also a little bit weird. Keep in mind the direction of this arrow, because we think in terms of left to right, but this is moving from right to left. So always be mindful of this. It starts with the branch you're merging into, and then the branch that you're merging from. So we do create pull request. We won't have any errors here because we've been following the direction. We've been pushing everything upstream this whole time, which is why we're not having any trouble merging into main. And when main is your production branch, that's really important. So it's good to have a buffer, which is another reason why even if the client, if they don't demand, or if my employer, if they don't demand that we have a staging branch, although it's always a good idea to have a staging environment, I always still create it because it creates an extra buffer. You don't want your production environment to go down because you push something stupid to it. It gives you one more layer of protection so that the actual application doesn't crash because you pushed something without thinking it through. So we're going to merge the pull request, and there we go. Everything's up to date. So, does anyone have any questions about any of that stuff? I'm not going to get like super deep into all the ins and outs of Git, but those are all of the types of things that I do throughout my day. That's how I deal with merge errors. That's how I create new branches. That's how I merge upstream and create new branches downstream. And that's how I work with other people and make sure that we minimize those merge errors. Those are some of the, I use the term loosely, but I say best practices that we use. But there's nothing best practice related to like the commit messages I'm pushing or anything like that. This is just in practice how I do it day to day at my job. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to talk about it. Okay, Jumping Bean. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I don't know exactly when you sent that. Oh, 4:36. Okay, that was a while ago. All right, guys, speak now or forever hold your peace because I am beyond exhausted, and we'll do something a little bit more produced, at some point in the future. But I hope I could clear up some of these, Git merge issues for you. Okay, you missed the live stream, but are wondering the applications or uses of GitHub. All right, so I'll do a quick walkthrough of what Git and GitHub are. So Git is a version control system. What that means is think about when you're working on a code base, you don't want to be afraid to change the code. So the beautiful thing about Git is that if you want to make some changes to the code and you're not sure if it's going to break the code, instead of having to copy all of your files and folders into another folder so that you can make some experimental changes, or instead of having to collaborate with someone by sharing files in some Google Drive stream or whatever it is, you can do all of this through the cloud and through the terminal using Git. Git is the tool. GitHub is a website and a user interface that lets you interact with this tool. And just like any cloud product, the beautiful thing about that is that it's distributed, it's online, you can access it from anywhere. So it's what really makes building applications, especially with a team full of people, that's what makes it so easy these days. It gives you the confidence to be able to make radical changes to your code base, and then you can just sort of discard them if they don't work out. If two developers make conflicting changes to the same code base, it gives you a method to rectify the code and sort of figure out, well, who made which changes and which changes broke the application. So what do we need to fix in order to get it working again? I genuinely couldn't imagine doing software development without Git. It's just ridiculously important. So that's what Git is. And then GitHub is just the online distributed cloud user interface type version of it. Yeah, and Git switch is huge. before I knew about Git Switch, I would, I hate to admit this, but I would push things to branches that I'm not supposed to push to. Like, there have been times in the past where I have pushed something to main or to dev just because I made a bunch of changes, and then I realized, oh no, I'm on the wrong branch. And then I just sort of held my breath and took that leap of faith and pushed it to the main branch and hoped everything would be okay. But now that I know about Git Switch, never again. Um, super, super helpful. All right. Well, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope someone got something out of this. Again, I'll do something a little bit more, produced in the future, but I seriously need to get away from my computer screen right now. All right, very cool. Well, thanks for stopping by, and shoot me a message if you have any more specific questions. And if you're one of the people I was talking to over the last few days about Git issues, if you didn't catch this or if something didn't make sense, shoot me a direct message and I'll try to help you out. Probably not for like a few hours because I seriously need to get away from my screen, but I'll catch you guys later.